Very good. We'll hold Q&A. I'm taking note of the Q&A as it comes in through our chat. So thank you for the participation on that end. And we have over 116 participants right now. So thank you for attending today's meeting. And I will let you know that the recorded remarks will be available on our website at a later time. I wanted to also speak briefly with you about the day-to-day terminal operations. Some in the media have reported some gate issues, some questions about that, as well as I noticed last night that the PMA listed a new gate hour publication on its website. Can you give us any insight to how that might impact operations as you see it?
Yeah, I don't see any specific impact to operations, but a couple things as background. It was brought to my attention last week that the terminal operators were lacking the cleaning solutions and materials necessary to keep our equipment sanitized and our communication pieces also sanitized as they're handed from one member of the longshore workforce to another. We immediately leapt into action. And with the great work of Marty Adams from the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, secured 1,400 gallon equivalents of bleach and solution that is being mixed by our hazmat team, diluted to the levels that the CDC has outlined as appropriate for sanitization of industrial equipment. That product is being distributed throughout the harbor community as we speak. Both Los Angeles and Long Beach terminals are receiving 32-ounce spray bottles that will help our men and women on the waterfront keep their equipment clean and prevent any spread of the COVID-19 virus. The gate activity is predicated on volume, and while our terminal operators are open every day, there may be changes in truck gate activity simply based on the needs of that individual terminal and the customers they serve. We are posting that information on scheduling on our website at portoflosangeles.org, and we're also pushing that information through our other channels to get to you, the truckers, and other supply chain partners. Very fluid situation. Again, we're moving about half of the cargo that we did in the third quarter of 2019, as many of our importers rushed to get ahead of those so ill-advised tariffs that were to be implemented by Washington. We can process this amount of cargo, but it takes a lot of planning. And the information sharing aspect of this has never been more important. And I would encourage the members and the other supply chain partners you work with to join us in that effort.
Thank you. And to the point, some have mentioned that the appointment system and PeerPass in particular might have been suffering some struggles during this period. Do you, at the Port of LA, see any, how do you see that issue, and do you see it, the continuity and the benefit of PeerPass remaining?
Well, something we have championed on both of those issues is, one, a universal appointment system between the ports of Long Beach and Los Angeles marine terminals. Unfortunately, we have not gotten a lot of cooperation in that area, but the Los Angeles marine terminal operators have committed just that to us. And I announced it at our State of the Port speech back in January of this year. We have the technology available to us, and we'll be ready to implement that process very soon on the Los Angeles side. But as we well know, most of the members and most of the import-export community uses both ports. And we think it's imperative that the Port of Long Beach and their terminal operators join us in this effort that has been outlined by the BCOs as critical. I have long talked about PeerPass and the need for modernization. The monies that flow towards secondary and tertiary gates through PeerPass have been long panned. There was also talk very early on as to how we would do this in a very different way. I stand by ready to act and enable the ability for terminals to work on extended gate hours, mitigate traffic during normal rush hour timeframes when folks are commuting to work and children are going to school. And last, making it so that it is economical for the importer and exporter to do. And I look as we come up and catch our breath from all the work that we're doing right now to work with you on what that modernization may look like. I have some ideas, but I also want to hear from you. I do not see at this point, to answer your question specifically, any particular breakdowns other than the value the Pure Pass offers and making sure that we have fluidity at our gates and available times for our truck community to move your cargo in and out of our port complex. If you see something different, by all means, please let us know. And in the room spaced very much so around social distancing, I have Mike DiBernardo, who is the head of all of our commercial activity, and David Libatique, who is in charge of our stakeholder engagement. We have the right people to fan out should you see things on the ground that need our attention.
Well, to that point, I think that the one concern has been this requirement for dual transactions. And do you see that as being an issue that is going to change as a result of COVID-19 in an effort to reposition certain equipment, particularly the empties, because obviously there's an imbalance in the trade right now. And I very clearly heard your commentary on the MSC vessels that are going to be dedicated to helping rebalance the equipment. But with specific to dual transactions, is that something you see as being a particular issue?
It's my view as a longtime logistics person that dual transactions only benefit all of us. Prior to the COVID-19 activity really taking place and the executive orders coming out last week, less than 20% of our could I ask that individual to mute their phone, please? Seems to be a little activity at home.
I'm trying to find out who that is. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
About that,
I'm sure the kids are having a good time and just don't want to interrupt. So going back to the question, dual transactions make up about 20% of all truck gate activity today. Going back about a decade ago, we did about 80% of all truck transactions on the dual basis. The information is readily available, but if we can't find a time to deliver an empty back to a terminal and plan that with picking up an import, that obviously impedes our progress in this area. Making it mandatory is something that we're trying to work our way into as a collective. But again, if there are individual terminals who are giving us a little bit of concern around those areas, we'll be happy to engage in conversation and see what best way we can deliver the fluidity at the gates that the members need. But mind you, at the same time, our ability to make sure that those gates are operating fluidly, our truck community getting the number of turns per day to earn a good living and get the cargo where it needs to be, while at the same time reducing emissions because we're that much more efficient, all play into the right narrative, but we have to execute.
Thank you. Also, in some of your earlier remarks, there's been expectation that we would see a Chinese exportation increase. When do you forecast, or based on Port Optimizer expectations and some of the other issues that we've identified, such as traffic patterns and pollution in China, that would kind of indicate that there's an increase or return to work? Does the port have any expectation of when that increase in exports to the United States might return to something more normal?
Yeah, a couple things. I think number one, that all of our indications are that we'll see a modest uptick beginning mid to late April. That may be paired by the information that we're receiving this week from major retailers that orders, as I mentioned, are being postponed, pushed back, or even canceled. So we're going to continue to circle that data and run it to ground. There's a great article out of Bloomberg this morning, and we continue to work very closely with many media outlets, including that firm, on trying to ascertain just exactly what's happening on the ground through regular contact with our folks who are working there, as well as other metrics, as I mentioned earlier. Economic output is increasing, but it is modest. And more specifically for our industry, the manufacturing output, as I stated at the top, is at about 50% of normal capacity at this time of year. So there is still a long way to go. And again, modest increases, I don't see us returning to normal anytime soon. And my view of what we see today is the knock-on effects of these two major shocks to the supply chain. One, the tariff policies, and now two, COVID-19's global health crisis will see us in uneven territory for the balance of this year. Over time, as your merchandisers make decisions on where to source product from and what routes to take from the transportation side of your business, we'll have a little cleaner view as to what we see. But I see the impacts of the tariffs alone knocking about 15% of our import volume to other marketplaces.
Well, to that point, what role do you see as South Korea's exports and their predicted forecast as helping to make up for that, given their current struggles with COVID-19?
If we look on our book of business, it's about 55% weighted to China. Japan and Korea follow as distant second and thirds. Last year and leading into the first quarter of this year, increase in cargo volume from Southeast Asia, specifically the SIMPTVZ, seen strong double-digit growth. But it takes about 7 Vietnams to make up for South China's Guangdong province. Other countries are running at very, very high levels of capacity output, simply because up until now, the U.S. economy had been moving in a very strong fashion for the better part of a decade. Simply to move cargo out of China, as I'm sure many of your merchandisers have reported, to Southeast Asia locations may not yield cost savings that are anticipated by pundits in Washington, and also may not achieve the necessary factory floor space that is required to migrate decades worth of relationships down to new locations seemingly very quick in a supply chain calendar. So with that, there still remains to be a tremendous amount of uncertainty. Reported early this morning, Pacific Coast time out of Washington, was the contemplation of possibly rolling back or halting some tariffs on imported goods for 90 days, but we've gotten no traction on that just yet. And realistically, as everyone on this call knows, the only one who pays the tariffs are the United States importers of record.
Very good. I know you're aware of the letter that was written to the president by association, I think, of approximately 116, 120 retailers and various importers asking for relief on those tariffs. But I haven't heard anything that has come out of that other than what you just reported. So I think we're all waiting with an expectation that either the president or Congress will act to mitigate some of these tariffs to allow the increase in imported goods.
Noted very well. And I don't want to become overly political on this or any other public dialogue other than the fact that the tariffs don't work. Imports increased, exports declined, and here at the Port of Los Angeles for 14 consecutive months. And the trade gap has widened. About 25% of our port's imports are parts, components, and peripherals that go directly into the United States manufacturing stream. There has been irreparable damage, and while we continue to go after these trade agreements one-on-one, we've given sales leads to every other trading country in the world. That is not going to equate to success from our perspective.
Very good. You also mentioned some points about Port of LA employees and various workers throughout the California's critical infrastructure worker structure, which would include obviously terminal operators and various logistics employees as outlined in part through the mayor's leadership and the mayor's announcement, as well as Governor Newsom's announcements. Does the Port of Los Angeles have any particular thoughts about critical employees, how they're deploying them within your own infrastructure, as well as motor carriers coming to from the port and working with the various distribution facilities that have to, by definition, receive the cargo? Otherwise, there's no place for the cargo to go.
Right. We've touched on pieces of that question, and maybe we'll bring it back home a little more succinctly. The city of Los Angeles employs 45,000 people today across 42 city departments under the direction of Mayor Eric Garcetti. The work that's being done today of telecommuting, safer at home, and trying to deploy those essential city services on a daily basis is our mission and our task at hand. We in our harbor department have a little more than 900 employees. About half of those work out in the field in the name of police officers and construction and maintenance teams. All construction projects have been designated as essential, and work will continue on infrastructure and waterfront public access type work that we have been doing here thus far. The folks who are telecommuting right now are still part of our teams and working daily on the cargo flow of container, bulk, liquid bulk, and the other entities of transportation that we help support. We have been working closely with the Pacific Maritime Association on work rules and allowing their board to work specifically within NLRB sanctioned dialogue with the International Longshore and Workers Union, which has recently promoted a new piece of work and process around the sanitization of equipment. And next will be work specifically on interaction with drivers. Now, of course, heeding to the elected officials' requirements around social distancing and being smart about how we interact and how we stay at home, space ourselves at work for essential processes, we'll continue to watch that very closely to make sure that we don't put truck drivers, port workers, or those terminal employees in any situation that would compromise their future health and considerations of safety. So that's ongoing work every day that we see. Again, tying back to the executive orders, David Libatique, Mike, and I were on the phone yesterday with California's Secretary of Transportation, imploring, along with other folks, including the PMSA, to tighten up on the language of essential workers and what essential work means. Because again, there are folks who are claiming that they can't open their DCs, they can't move containers to those facilities because they're not essential. And there is fear by some, reported directly to me, that they will be arrested by the authorities if they commence work. I report to you that that is not true. We will continue to work to make sure the messaging is out there very clearly and from the authorities that need to provide it to ensure that our truck drivers and our cargo continues to move. And again, at a time now where Mayor Garcetti has just appointed me as Chief Logistics Officer for the City of Los Angeles, in addition to my duties as Port Director, to focus on the essential goods moving to the American public and our healthcare system in and around Los Angeles County. We cannot at this point claim that televisions or sofas are not essential to goods movement, because if they start to congest the system of essential goods that must get to the American people and our hospital system, we have failed. So we'll continue to campaign in this area, Washington, Sacramento, anywhere else we need to make sure that our folks are on the job, have a safe and healthy working environment, and we can continue to move the goods to and from the Port of Los Angeles.
Thank you very much. I think that point you made about having distribution facilities open is particularly important to the membership as well as to the smooth flow of goods, because obviously if we can't get the goods out of the harbor through a simple dray, it's just going to add to the ongoing strain on the system and would eliminate, or not eliminate, but make it more difficult to get the key goods that need to get out, part of an ongoing issue. We want to avoid that. And so obviously discriminating about what's in the box at the terminal level may just impact and delay the process.
That's right.
At this point, we also have a mention of the Coast Guard handling of the crews and the vessels that arrive. That's come up on several occasions. Are there any updates that you can share with us on how you're collaborating with the United States Coast Guard and crews of vessels that are arriving?
Sure. All the work of the United States ports come under the regulatory oversight of the United States Coast Guard. And in working through one of the nation's only port police forces on the ground here with 200 sworn and civilian officers, we have been working closely with the U.S. Coast Guard, CBP, and other allied agencies nationally, regionally, and locally. And to give you a little bit of a frame of what we've been doing, with the regulations that have been updated since the heightened alerts of COVID-19 began to trickle through the supply chain in late fourth quarter of 2019, every vessel coming to the Port of Los Angeles must have its captain or master report into Coast Guard and CBP on the health disposition of their crew 96 hours or 4 days before a vessel is scheduled to arrive at our port. If there are any illnesses or if there are COVID-19 concerns and symptoms, that vessel will be quarantined outside the port's breakwater. waiting for medical expertise to arrive, evaluate, and test those who may be symptomatic of the virus. If the captain, master, or ship's doctor does not report, holds back information, or falsifies reports, there are civil and criminal penalties associated, beginning with, but not ending, at $94,000 per incident. I report to you that all vessels since this regulation went into place have complied with the regulation of the U.S. Coast Guard. We have not quarantined a ship, but we have been working very closely with the cruise industry. And that industry has sought our help, but also managing through the Coast Guard and CBP to ensure we have the proper medical advice before berthing, managing the passengers properly, and the onboard crew. Remember, these vessels have crew upwards of 1,000 people. And as we continue to work through their self-imposed pause for the next 60 days, not doing business for 2 more months, we are working with skeleton crews to keep the ships at what we call in the industry hot anchor. And they will be cared for in the proper ways to make sure that they are rotated in and out to take care of crews who are coming by, as well as medical supplies, food, and any type of sanitization materials that will be needed to go through these ships and make sure that cleanliness is their first task after human safety.
And in addition, you also offered the notice of the arrival of the U.S. Hospital ship Mercy. Can you give us some insight as to where she might be located? And I was noticed in your comments that these were for non-COVID-19 patients. I hope I got that right.
You did. Yeah, the work that we're doing with the United States Navy and other allied agencies is continuing to develop, and I am not permitted at this time to give you any more detail than I shared just now. But suffice it to say that ship will be coming in very soon, and it will be 1,000 hospital beds equivalent, manned and staffed with United States military, medical personnel, and their support staffs. The objective is to manage non-COVID-19 patients and take a little bit of the pressure off our landside hospitals. And 3 categories of those hospitals: public, Los Angeles County; the private sector businesses; and thirdly, the Veterans Administration's hospitals throughout the county. So there'll be more to come, and when authorized by the United States Navy, the port and our other allied partners will be making statements to the media directly, and will ensure that your members have the most updated information. But I assure you, from all the work that we've done so far and led from our side by both Chief Tom Gazy of the Port Police and Mike DiBernardo, the welcoming of the U.S. and the United States Navy ship Mercy will not, and I underscore not, impede the cargo flow here at the Port of Los Angeles.
Thank you. Recently, or last week, there was a brief closure of the Houston Port Terminal Complex in 2 particular terminals, I understand, due to a COVID-19, a worker who tested positive for COVID-19. I believe Houston put into place a particular action plan. I wondered if you had collaborated or spoken with the Port of Houston about their response and what lessons might be learned about how we would respond if such a situation were to arise here.
Sure. We have protocols in place, but we're also very friendly with most ports. And we have taken, Roger Gunther in Houston's a good friend, we have taken advice from his staff on what they did, what they saw, and what they would do next. I've also been working very closely with the port director in Venice, Italy, who is at the epicenter right now of this COVID-19 virus. Yet his port complex has remained open to shuttle and collect essential goods for the Italian people and those of the European continent, as well as important medical supplies and machinery that must go to the healthcare facilities and hospitals. So we're staying very close to people who are on the ground, as well as employing our own practices based on the medical experts that we work with every day. Led by Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti, recently his general manager cohort met with Dr. Barbara Farrar, Los Angeles County's top physician, in working around what protocols will be should someone feel ill at home or a family member, should someone feel ill in the office or on a marine terminal, and what we do next to help and assist those individuals, up to and including testing, feedback from that testing in an anonymous fashion to ensure we maintain all HIPAA requirements, but while looking to preserve the health and safety of those who may have worked around that affected individual. I have also been asked to share that for individual private sector protocols, you can contact Jim McKenna at the Pacific Maritime Association for any information you need with respect to individual terminal operations and their business contingency plans. Suffice it to say, I have also turned in my continuity of operations plan to the mayor some weeks ago that has been vetted and approved, which we will be carrying through on our daily basis from our check-ins all the way to the operations at the field level.
Thank you. I also wanted to discuss briefly with you collaboration with the Federal Maritime Commission and any discussions of per diem or demurrage waivers as this situation unfolds.
Yeah, a couple of conversations have taken place in the last week. We had a conference call with John Butler, the CEO of the World Shipping Council, and some of his members' representatives. I've spoken directly to Commissioner Rebecca Dye, who's very well known to most of us in the supply chain. And last Friday, both Executive Director at the Port of Long Beach, Mario Cordero, and our key staff spoke with Chair of the FMC, Michael Corey. The subject of per diem and demurrage has come up on a regular basis. And what we don't want to have are people capitalizing and profiting on the inefficiencies of the supply chain. The chair himself asked us to be, as an industry, sensitive to the plight of the United States importer and exporter during times like this of crisis. But what I will tell you right now is that our terminals are operating fluidly. And again, I put a drone up in the air with a camera yesterday to get my own singular view on what our terminal operations, rail facilities, and truck gate activity looked like. And I will report to you, of the 7 Los Angeles marine terminals, we are nowhere near capacity on the ground, whether it be with respect to dry or reefer containers, empty or laden boxes. Our rail facilities are moving fluidly, but it takes all of us working together at this time to make sure that we have the information necessary. I don't want to get caught by surprise. Many of you remember how stuck we got during the unraveling of the supply chain in the winter of 2014 and 15. At that point in time, many senior level and cabinet members of the Obama administration implored me to come up with a solution, or they would fix it for me. And that solution became pretty simple to all of us after many roundtables, focus groups, and user discovery sessions. And that is simply share information. We then took the step to invest in an information sharing system. It's unfortunate that others haven't joined us yet, but we have a line of sight to cargo coming our way that can only be accentuated by the participation of the cargo owner here in the United States. And that is very simple. How we see cargo, how we can segment it by rail or truck, long-haul truck, short-haul and regional deliveries, and what we need to do to move critical goods through our system. And as part of the other work I'm doing as Chief Logistics Officer, it is just that. It's about segmenting cargo based on information. We are not using your data in any untoward way. We are not selling your data to other folks. The job here is to let logisticians do their work so we can move the cargo as smoothly as possible. One of the basic ideas is very simple, as developed by Mike DiBernardo. About 1/3 of all of our imports move to the Inland Empire, about 60 miles away. If we could stow our ships, work them, and reserve space on our terminal tarmacs, giving truckers the confidence that they could pick up containers overnight, deliver on a hub and spoke system in the IE, that frees up our truck gates by 1/3 during normal operations. And there are many more ideas like this that are all born from information sharing. So if there's any work that you need us to do to get you online with what we're attempting, or that you want to share even more information than you're doing today, please contact us.
Very good. And that is consistent with the Port Optimizer and GE technologies that you're implementing, correct?
That's right. But the core of information sharing is regardless of the underlying service provider. We just happened through a very public process to find a great partner in GE. This work can continue around the table and now through mediums like this that you've set up today to make sure that we have the most updated information possible. And we also know about trends. Again, I'm hearing from many retailers directly. I'm hearing from the media about their conversations with retailers around what downline orders are going to look like. We need to make sure we run that truth to ground so we are prepared and we can give that information back upstream as well. And we have a lot of time to react. The order cycle process, as many of you live every day, runs between 60 and 120 days. We have a lot of time to plan, and that information will just make us that much smarter.
Excellent. And as a closing question from my end, and then we'll go to the panel questions here with our remaining time, with our participant questions with our remaining time. What do you see as the impact of COVID-19 on the Port of LA's strategic plan, as just a general comment, and if you see that strategic plan altering or changing in any way because of what's happened?
Yeah, I think that's a very thoughtful question. As an American living in China during SARS, I had a firsthand view of what a viral epidemic looks like. We took a lot of learnings from that and brought them here to Los Angeles for this very case. And I still see this as unique, where we have much more to do and learn about. The work that is being done remotely, the ability for technology like this now to allow us to communicate, and what we must do to engage medical experts early on to avoid losing key folks for any period of time on the delivery of essential services. But most importantly of all, we have shown from the more recent statistics that were published last night here in Los Angeles County that this virus does not discriminate. And we must take this health and safety concern as job number one for all of us as global citizens. Working that into our strategic plan, health and wellness has always been a priority, but we can always do more, and we will do just that. What we learned from SARS was that the global supply chain was hit by about 40 billion US dollars. This will be a multiple of that from what we have seen thus far. So how do we better plan contingencies? What do we do with vessel space, certainty, and allocations? And how do we make sure that we're communicating properly, that in the event of a global pandemic like this, what do our tabletop exercises look like, our COOPs and our BCPs, to make sure that we can manage the critical goods that must move through this port and work with all of our customers on what's critical to their companies. I will say too, in this other role that we are just starting to open up, I have been heartened by the amount of companies and individuals that we've known for decades raising their hands and asking to help. We don't know yet what that help could look like, but that dialogue is open and assisting. We had a company yesterday that works specifically in the restaurant and hospitality industry. Both have been shuttered, and they have opportunities to help us not only secure certain types of goods and materials, but also cleaning products, and a number of very talented people that can help us activate those from warehouses and distribution centers right here in Southern California. So it's keeping up those contacts that we've created and the business relationships that have been existent in our most darkest hour to see what we could do together.
Thank you very much. I wanted to go through a couple of the Zoom group chat questions that have been posted. And I think you've already hit on this topic already, but it goes to the issue of the governor clarifying the order on who is and who is not an essential worker. But is there anything else you'd like to add to the comments that you've already made?
Now, one of the best policy guys I know, David Libatique, along with Aveen Sharma, have been working day and night with our elected and appointed officials at the federal, state, and local levels to make sure we get this right. Yesterday on our talk, as I alluded to with California State Transportation Secretary Kim, we also pointedly gave him the verbiage that we needed to bubble up and make sure that that clarity comes out next. But again, for you, for the folks that work with us every day in the supply chain, your DCs should be open. Your truckers and delivery processes should be very mobile, and the flow of cargo should be consistent, because we will need to make sure those essential goods, supplies, and machineries can get to the folks who need them. And equally as important from the business side of what we do, when this economy begins to recover, and it will, we need to be prepared for the American consumer, and we all have that in common.
Thank you very much. In addition to that, there's a question about your current collaboration with the Port of Long Beach with respect to COVID-19, and specifically, how is that developing, and how are you collaborating with the Port of Long Beach?
We have excellent relationship with the folks that work at the Port of Long Beach, and we are in constant communication, even at the level of our board members, and our two mayors are talking on a regular basis. They both get along famously. The work that we're trying to do here matches both sides of the port, and it is not proprietary in nature. And to give you that one example, as the ILWU approached us last week in desperate need of cleaning solutions, we went out with Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, procured 1,400 gallon equivalents, and are distributing them to both sides of the San Pedro Bay. So whatever each can do to help the other, we maintain that posture.
Very good. I think you've already addressed the question on reposition of empties. I do also want to ask you, as we wrap this up today, I want to say thank you so much for giving us your time and your thoughts and input, and assuring our membership about what the areas where they can help. I know there's been a couple of questions about how we can continue this dialogue. I do know that you have a YouTube video station that is dedicated to the Port of Los Angeles. If you'd like to comment a little bit about that and some of the information that's available there.
Yeah, a couple answers to that question. Number one, we absolutely want to continue this dialogue and fielding the questions at the higher policy level all the way down to individual needs. But the requests have been somewhat voluminous to this point. So through this medium and others, we're going to be putting together wider reaching video conferences with our supply chain community beginning next week. And that's at the request of some others that we've been in dialogue with, like the National Retail Federation, Agricultural Transportation Coalition, and others in the industry, both private and public sector. So if it's permissible with your membership, we'd like to initiate that for next week's discussion. The work that we want to do on the ground as far as how we get the information out is happening on a regular basis here. I'm putting out regular 2 to 3 minute videos, very quick updates of what's happening at the Port of Los Angeles. One, I was told to try to dispel myths like we've been talking about here today, and a couple of things that just aren't so clear. And others are to give you a real and accurate situational representation of what's happening on the ground. And I think we have taken steps to do just that by flying real-time drones around with images and video to come back and show us the current situation of our terminals, rail facilities, et cetera. So by all means, I'm open to continuing this talk and making sure, so long as the membership sees it as valuable. And if you wouldn't mind, let's draw a wider audience so we can get to more people at one time, and then be able to manage on the side what the individual needs may be, so we can help there as well.
Great idea. And I do want to mention for anyone who's listening here that I believe the Port of LA can be reached at community@portofla.org, as well as the portofla.org/COVID COVID-19. And then, of course, the YouTube channel as well. Are there any other media outlets or information outlets that you'd care to share to wrap up your remarks here today, Gene?
Yeah, I've set up a special mailbox called Ask Gene at portla.org for specific questions. Many of us know each other very well and know how to contact Mike, Dave, myself, but we have a whole litany of folks that are monitoring those mailboxes, and specifically Ask Gene, so we can get to your issues as quickly as possible.
Thank you so very much, and thank you again for your time. It's 8:51, so with that, I'll just say on behalf of the Foreign Trade Association, our membership, and all the participants on the call here today, thank you so very much for your time.
It's a pleasure, Cameron, and thank you to the membership.
All right. Thank you, Gene. Have an excellent day.
You too.
Bye-bye. And with that, we'll conclude the meeting. I will let all the membership know that this we'll be posting a recording of this interview with Gene Seroka online, as well as listing the points of contact for the Port of Los Angeles, and a mail piece that will go out to the participants on this call today. Again, thank you for all of your time and your input. And we had over 120 members at the height of the call, so I think that's a great showing, and we're looking forward to having more on our future calls with other participants and stakeholders in the trade. Thank you.